Right. Once again, thank you for joining everyone and welcome to episode 3 of our of our inaugural conversation series called Conversations That Matter, along with my co-host and mentor Priya. So lovely to have all of you here, and I know some of you have attended the previous episodes as well. What started as a conversation just between Priya and I has emerged into this today, and it's been a wonderful journey. And season 1, as you all know, is psychological safety at work. That's what we've been focused on. So far, we have had 2 conversations where Priya and I facilitated a group conversation really with the attendees on the what and why of psychological safety. And in the last episode, we really delved into a couple of case studies. We've also shared some content back with everyone that's registered for this conversation series. So we looked at what happens when there is psychological safety in an environment when there isn't or there's a deficit of it. So that's what we've been looking at. And episode 3, which is today, this is a panel discussion that we're going to have, and we have industry experts amongst us, Ben Marglin and Rekha Narendra. So we're really pleased to host you both here for this conversation today, and very grateful that you've taken time out of your weekend to share with us. Thank you both. So we're going to get into this in just a few minutes. A quick introduction to those who are here for the first time today. My name is Meenakshi Iyer, if you didn't know that, and I'm physically based here in the U.S. on the East Coast in Virginia, and at the moment coming to you from Orlando. And I come from the technology space. I've been in the health tech space for the last 10, 12 years, primarily working on enterprise systems implementations. So my entire career has been at the intersection of people, process, and technology. And in the last 3 years where I've landed, I started my own coaching consulting practice, Nostra Solutions and Services. And that's what has led to me meeting such wonderful people such as Priya, and who have led me on a different path and helped me be the coach that I am today. So it's absolutely wonderful to be here. And with that, I would pass it on to Priya, if you wouldn't mind introducing yourself.
Sure. Thank you, Meenakshi. We've been enjoying this conversation, the last 2 conversations, and today the third one. And before I introduce, I really want to thank Rekha and Ben for joining us, and a big thanks to Natalia, Alina, and Neeraj, who have consistently been with us the past few sessions, and Avinash for taking the leap of faith and joining us today. So, yeah, I've been working with people, if you may call that, as a catalyst, enabler in some way or the other, in different forms and shapes and avatars. And currently, I am a coach, a leadership coach, work with individuals and with teams in order to enable people to get to their greatness, if you may call it, which is inherent in everybody. And I'm also a mentor coach, so I take great pride in enabling people to become coaches. So we have our community grows, and this is what happens when our community grows. We have people collaborating, we have people learning from each other, leveraging each other's strengths and all of that. Super happy to be here, and we hope to have another round of conversations that matter eventually after a break from these 3 sessions. Over to you, Meenakshi.
Absolutely. Well, now we'll get into the conversation for today, and I'd like to start off by introducing Ben. I've had the pleasure and privilege of knowing Ben for the past few years, and Ben is an technology and enterprise transformation executive and a people leader. And something that I have learned from Ben is the importance and value of placing people in the center of everything. And that's something I've learned from Ben. And Ben has been also a huge supporter of North Star Solutions and Services. He's a past speaker at our events. And as his day job, he's an executive leader at a technology consulting company that caters to specifically the federal government in the US. And he does a lot of work, client-facing work, where he's responsible for all client delivery across the organization, across all federal clients that the company services. And his functional expertise lies in digital and information technology, change management, technology business management, governance, and IT program management. He has several professional certifications in those areas, and he has a master's degree in public policy from Duke University and a bachelor's degree from Colby College here in the US. And he serves as a mentor, both within the organization and outside of it. And I personally have learned a lot from him, and it's an absolute privilege to have you here today with us, Ben. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you. I mean, I'm happy to be here. I really enjoy these sessions. And as you said, you sort of did me very well, good justice in terms of my introduction. I appreciate that. But my passion over the course of my career has been all about the people, as you said. I mean, I've worked in professional services, for pretty much my entire career. And I always tell people at the end of the day, it's about what the people are doing for the clients and how they are engaged. And in a professional services environment, if the people aren't in the right place, then they're not going to deliver what they need to deliver for the clients. So it's not going to be good for our clients. It's not going to be good for the company. And you're not going to get the results that you need to get. So I work in a company with a lot of engineers. And I'm not an engineer, and I take great pride in that. And so but I find that engaging engineers and others in the right way to try to get them to achieve the kind of results they need is a big challenge and a passion for what I do in my day-to-day life. So thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you, Ben. Back to you, Priya.
Yeah, it's a lovely statement that you made, that you work with engineers, and it's both a challenge and a passion. Oftentimes you don't see the two words go together, so it's great to hear that.
Yep.
So welcome, Ben, and thank you.
Thank you.
I'd like to introduce Rekha. Rekha is, and I'm going to read it out because I don't want to miss anything. And when she sent me this mail with her, her brief, I said, "Hi, Rekha, I'm meeting you again," because I didn't know half of what she had. I didn't know that about her, though we go back a long way. So Rekha is a human resources leader with over 25 years of experience across multiple industries. Yeah, having held HR leadership roles globally and at an India level, she has established herself as a strong people partner to business with a forward-thinking mindset. She has a strong track record in building a great workplace culture and has won many accolades for her retention strategies. I think most required now. Rekha, you must be in demand. And people interventions in companies such as Murugappa Group, Ford Motor Company, Genpact, and Kantar. She's consistently been part of a high potential women leaders and future HR leader programs. She's passionate about mentoring people and is a certified life coach. She was recently featured in Forbes magazine for the work she has done in establishing a great work culture in the new normal. She's an avid cyclist, marathoner, and trekker, and is passionate about contributing to society. She is currently working as global head of HR in Winwire. Absolute pleasure to have you here, Rekha. And I know that there are other things that you do besides the workplace list of what all your capabilities and your achievements. I know you paint and you dabble with other things, and I also know of your love for colors. So yeah, pleasure to have you here, Rekha.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Priya. Thanks, Meenakshi. I think, when Priya reached out to me, Meenakshi, about this, conversation, I think it was a no-brainer for me. I said yes instantly. In fact, I think there was a change in dates and, I almost didn't make it. But the minute I know that my travel plans had changed, I think she was the first person that I messaged saying that, hey, my travel plans have changed and I am, available on this date. Because I think this topic is so close to my heart. And that's what I told, Priya also. I think the world that we live in today, it's extremely important. And as human beings, as, whether it is in your family or whether it is at your workplace or whether even amongst friends, I think, having psychological safety and being in that environment, is or creating that environment is just so important. So I'm really looking forward to this conversation, and I hope that whatever comes out of it will actually, help and impact many others.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And before we get started, I just wanted to let everyone know that I'm sharing a link here in the chat. This is an idea board, so it's like an electronic sticky note board. And feel free to add there are 4 sections you'll see, thoughts, takeaways, questions, and anything else. Feel free to add your cards to this. This is what the reason I personally like using this is it can be shared back with the community. We can download it rather than having to worry about what's in chat. So we can download it as a document and share it back with everyone. So feel free to use it. You don't have to. It's totally optional. And this is very conversational. And since we are a small group live right now, we'll be taking questions as they come in as well. So please feel free to add your questions to the chat or to idea boards, whatever works for you. In order to make this conversation productive and respect everyone's time, Priya and I had sent some questions to Rekha and Ben in advance. So that's what we'll be starting off with. We are intending to do this for the next 45 to 50 minutes. And then, as you know, this is being recorded and we'll share it back with the larger global community via channel. Yeah. So with that, Priya, back to you.
Yeah, so we started out sort of demystifying the word psychological safety, because this is a word that's often thrown around, but do we really understand what this means? And we had a few, the audience shared their thoughts about it, and a lot of it was around a sense of belonging, sense of being included, sense of being trusted. But the question I'll start perhaps with Ben to ask, what does this word psychological safety really mean to you as a leader in the current role that you play?
Yeah, I mean, the words that come to my mind when I saw the questions, trust was one of them, and respect. I think one of the concepts, even before I heard of the term of psychological safety as a leader, is you're not the smartest guy or gal in the room, and that you're looking for input from others. And if you put off a impression or a vibe that you already have the answer, or you're not necessarily looking for input from your team as you're going into a team meeting, they're going to feel that. And so I am usually struck by how savvy or how much the team can read through what's said and not said, and sort of the tone of voice, the visual. I mean, I think we can get into a lot of that with the virtual environment and what you see from a visual perspective. I forget what the statistic is, but it's definitely higher than 50% of communication is nonverbal. And so, when you think about psychological safety as a leader, I genuinely want to get input from my team. I want them to understand sort of and give me feedback on what we're doing, whether it's good or it's bad. And also, as a leader, I think a key component of it is being vulnerable, or being willing to be vulnerable, so that you show that you're a real person, and that you can interact with folks. So a big part of that for me is showing some of that, and not always having to put off an impression that you have all the answers and that you know everything that's going on. Because if that's what you do, then you don't really need your team to be providing input, and the team will get that. And if they don't feel safe in a way to offer that feedback, then it's gonna sort of take a left-hand turn and not go in a very good direction.
I love what you said, Ben. I think a lot of it is something that people sense. Yeah, and that's the, what shall I say? It's very nebulous, this, right? There is one part of it, we're really looking at perhaps some behaviors that clearly communicate psychological safety. But there's a lot of it that is communicated or not communicated, not just in words and behaviors. There's just so much more that people sense. I think that's really important. Rekha, what's been your what's your understanding, or what would you like to share?
So let me share something that I'm actually going through, right now. I've recently joined this organization and at a very senior level. So as a leader, I'm walking into this team, which has been used to working with a completely different leader altogether. And if I have to create, that psychologically safe environment, where the team feels comfortable, reaching out to me. I think there's a lot that I need to do as a leader. And in fact, a large part of my team actually lives in another state. And I've been consciously, traveling there at least once a month and maybe even twice a month, so that I am physically there in the same workspace, and I'm able to, connect to them and reach out to them. I'm not saying that, this is mandatory or it is a must. I know we live in a virtual or a hybrid workspace, but if there is an option, then I would strongly recommend that that is, the best option to be able to establish that trust. Because I think it, like Ben rightly said, ultimately, that's the strongest foundation. You start with the trust, and then you build on, your how well you listen to them, how well you communicate with them, how well you show them that you're there for them. And whatever be the issue, whatever be the challenge, that they can feel comfortable walking up to you and talking to you. Like, the last visit that I did, it was just so crazy that because there was a challenge that we were dealing with, and I was like practically in the conference room locked up with this one of my teams, and the other team were completely neglected. And then the last day I just told them that, hey, listen, and there were two people that I really had to spend time with, and I told them that, listen, let's just have lunch together. Just ordered some food, and it was just 30 minutes, but we had lunch together and we spoke. And even that 30 minutes, I felt made a big impact for them, and they felt good that we were able to spend that time. And that 30 minutes, I was just listening to them. I didn't even do anything else. I was just listening to them, just hearing them out, just trying to understand what issues or challenges that they had. And that itself made a huge difference. So I think, like you said, Priya, it's not something that you can actually pinpoint. There's a lot underlying, but I think as leaders we play a very, very important role in creating that safe space for our people, and we owe it to them.
So I'm just going to pick up from what you said, Rekha. So in our first conversation, we also spoke about, this is something we believe that it should come top down, right? The leaders should sort of embody, should show this, should behave in such a way that this happens for the employees. And the question we left the group with is asking, do we have to wait for it to come from top leadership? Can we, in our own individual ecosystem, do or be conscious of how we create or what shall I say, derail psychological safety, And a couple of things, I think Neeraj was there, Natalia was also there, and we kind of co-created some things about, in our own ecosystem, can we just sometimes just listen? And sometimes can we just listen to understand? Can we just hear people out? And like Rekha, you said, just meet. I mean, as meet, if not physically, at least, when you meet, you're really fully there. So that sort of question triggered for me. I mean, does it have to be top down? Can each of us in our own way do that as well? I mean, it's just a thought.
Well, you're absolutely right. I think each one of us must do it. My only worry is, Priya, how many of us have that awareness? And I think that's where these kind of sessions that you're doing, and which is why I made that statement initially, that I hope the conversation that we are having, actually helps in terms of, impacting several others, who listen to it. And maybe it sparks that something in them saying that, hey, I walk away and this is one change that I will start making in my workplace or with my team. And you're absolutely right. I think every, individual who has a team, or even, to their, even while working with their peers, the reason why the top down is important, because as an organization, if you want to create that culture, and and I think the biggest challenge that we are facing today in a virtual or a hybrid work environment is, how do you create that culture? Because people are no longer sitting in the same physical workspace. Everyone's sitting somewhere, you don't even know where they are, and virtually, how do you connect all of them? And that's where, kind of, creating this awareness, and I would put a lot of onus on the organizational leadership to make this as a key people priority, and to actually, create systems or processes, or at least first of all create awareness at a very, very basic level amongst their people leaders, that hey, this is something really, really important. And this is, actually kind of break it down, like the very first question that you said, how do you define psychological safety? What is psychological safety? And in an organizational context, how do you create psychological safety? So I think actually creating that awareness, I think that onus I would put on, on the leadership, and it has to come top down. But yes, every individual has to do it in their own ecosystem. I think there's no doubt about it.
I would just add to that, you will need something from the top down, but you can model that behavior at any level. If you're leading a team of 3 or 4 people, you can do it at your level, and what comes outside of that piece may either support or work against what you're trying to do, and so that's a different dimension. But within the construct of what you have control in, you certainly can model that behavior. And I think to Rekha's point, it's you want to model that behavior. You want your people leaders to be doing that in the right way. So the more that you do it individually with your teams, the more likely it is that that's going to spread in a positive way throughout the organization. And there's other aspects that you can't necessarily control, but you want to, through the things that you individually can control, you want to sort of promote that and encourage that kind of behavior in the best way possible. And it doesn't, you can be a leader without necessarily being in a formal leadership role by pushing that kind of concept and that kind of behavior throughout the team.
I could not agree with you more, Ben. And one of my strong beliefs is that you can lead from where you are, and leading self is more important, or that's the first step before you lead others. So that really resonated with me, what you shared. And and Rekha, what you said about setting the tone needs to come from the top, and that's a fair point. I agree with you on that. uh, and what both of you shared really sort of uh, alludes to a couple of questions that we had sent you. One was around how do we do this in virtual hybrid environments. We'll come to that. But then one of the other questions we had sent you was, hey, what are some behaviors that indicate the presence or a deficit of psychological safety at work? And I think we started off by saying it's something you sense, right? It's not as tangible. And as you were sharing, what came up for me is it's like the air we breathe. You don't realize it until there isn't any, right? So it's a bit like that. It's like a hygiene factor. You don't complain about it until you don't experience it. So to that point, and I'll start with you, Rekha. So what are your when you're in an environment, what do you perceive as indicators in terms of behaviors?
So, Meenakshi, I'm going to refer to this term, which has become very popular of late, and I'm sure many of you might have read about it. It's called quiet quitting.
Yes.
I'm sure you would have heard of it. And I'm actually seeing this phenomenon. And again, it goes back to this whole, the virtual, the, hybrid work environment, the disengagement. So why are people doing quite quitting? And I know there's tons being written on this subject, and there's a lot of analysis and all of that stuff. But I would actually link it back to a psychologically safe workplace. If I feel that there is no point in talking about my concerns or issues, and I don't think anyone's going to listen to me, or I don't think anyone's going to pay attention to it. Uh, I just mentally make up my mind that, let me just move on rather than even engaging in a conversation. And that is so scary. If an employee feels that they do not even want to make the first step in even talking about a concern or an issue that they're facing, or anything, it could even be a question, about maybe career or organization or growth. And if they feel that they don't even want to have that conversation, and they would rather just straight away go ahead and resign, that is the scary part. And I think that is one of the biggest indicators of a space or a workplace which is not engaged, or which is not psychologically safe. Sometimes couple of other indicators that I'm just as I'm talking, I'm kind of thinking about it. Sometimes you see a lot of difference between engagement surveys and what is actually happening in reality. You'll have situations where the engagement scores are so high, but on the ground, people are, unhappy, disengaged. Attrition is still quite high. Sometimes there's a tendency to just blame it on, oh, it's a competitive market, it's a competitive environment. People are getting crazy offers. But then I would still say that that is a very strong signal. There is something wrong there. So they're giving high scores in surveys. Maybe because they are not comfortable about talking or highlighting, but it is showing in your attrition, and it is showing in different ways. Maybe it's showing in higher absenteeism, or higher absconding, or higher attrition. I think these are all indicators, and these are all very, very worrisome, because if people feel that they are not in a space where they could talk, or highlight their concerns, then there is something seriously wrong.
Hmm. I loved how you called out what engagement surveys point out and what the ground realities are. It resonated with me, and also because very recently I was in a situation where this company had just announced a mass layoff, laid off 10% of their workforce, and then in their I think the next immediate next all hands, they shared the survey results that had just been concluded prior to the layoff. And it was so out of sync because the results were fabulous. But a major event had happened in the company. They acknowledged it. They did all the right things to manage that. But still, it was so jarring to talk about all these fantastic engagement scores when you just had a layoff. That's what came up for me when you shared that. And, I see a chat here. Avinash says, in my honest opinion, there hasn't been a significant relation established on engagement score to attrition. I would like to hear from Ben and Rekha on that. What's your response to that?
I think that, I mean, it goes to a lot of what Rekha said. I've been in environments where engagement scores or some type of survey score comes out and it's not positive. So you have different scenarios here. If it's not positive, then it's, well, why is it not positive? And I've seen leadership in an organization start to attribute, what they feel is the reason why it's not positive. Well, were the responses sort of, driven by a certain group or certain people? So they're immediately discounting what's in the data by saying, well, it's coming from some source that is not important to me, or is not really representative of the whole organization. Instead of, and again, this is a symbol to me that they're not willing to be vulnerable as a leader, to say, there's a problem in my organization that I need to fix or I need to address. Instead of that, they're saying, oh, there's some reason that this happened, and therefore I don't really need to worry about that. Or like I think she said, when you look at the market conditions today, at least in the space that I work in, the market is really tight for the workforce. And so if people are leaving, it's very easy to attribute it to sort of general market conditions rather than something that might be wrong in our organization. So it takes, in my mind, a very emotionally intelligent, a very mature leader to be able to be vulnerable and say, there is something there that we need to try to do a better job at. And I've seen organizations that are way too concerned with sort of the external perception of what's going on within the organization. And they are being, I see the comment about, denial. It's, they're basically putting blinders on about what's going on in their organization. And that's not, it's just going to continue to go in a very bad direction if they don't address that.
Absolutely. The drawing incorrect or inaccurate correlations between what's happening in the ecosystem and in the market and what's happening within the organization. That's a great call out. I want to look at the other side of the coin now. So all the examples that you shared are indicators when there's a deficit. What examples or what behaviors have you seen that actually indicate that the space is psychologically safe?
Well, I think it's obviously the flip side of that, and I'll just build on, at least in my opinion, build on a little bit of what Rekha said. Sometimes they don't talk. There's quiet when they don't think that what they're going to say is going to be listened to, that it's not going to make a difference. It even can go to the point of raising your opinion could have negative consequences. And so, I've seen folks in organizations where they've been there for a long time and they just know, look, I'm gonna keep my head down and do my day-to-day job, but I'm not gonna try to sort of upset the apple cart, because not only will they not listen to me, but it could actually negatively impact my path, because if I'm seen as someone that is raising problems or not on board with what we're doing, then it's gonna be something that will have negative consequences for me. On the flip side of that, you want to see where do you see a presence of psychological safety. Folks feel comfortable coming to the table with ideas and sharing, and they're very loud and vocal about that, even if they don't have the full answer. But they're willing to do that because they know it's going to be listened to in the right way, and that there's going to be respect around that and trust, and it's not going to have negative consequences for me. So if everyone believes in the fact that I'm raising my voice because I'm trying to get to what's right for the organization at the end of the day, then that's going to be a good thing. And if the converse is happening, then they're basically going to stop talking. And you always see the cliches of as a leader, you need to be really worried when it gets quiet.
Meenakshi, I think you're on.
Yeah, I just realized that. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I totally agree with you on that, Ben. And Priya, this takes me back to one of the things you had shared in the first episode, where you talked about the Timothy Clark's model, the 4 stages, the 4 levels of psych safety. Learner safety was one of them, and also challenging the status quo. That was the other piece of it. That's what I was reminded of when you shared, Ben. The chat is pretty active. So Avinash says, when Rekha mentioned quiet quitting, it prompts me to pop up my thought that it's important to recognize personality types, performance capabilities, etc., as a diversity and address that through psychological safety. This was something we were just, when we were getting ready for the conversation, Rekha, we were talking about that. Do you want to bring that in for the larger group?
Yeah. So Avinash, we had a very interesting pre-conversation before the actual chat started, and incidentally, this was a topic that came up. That unfortunately, when we talk about inclusion, there's a very narrow view of it today, which is just gender. Whereas inclusion actually, means many things, and in fact, it could mean, gender. It could mean, different regions. And I was giving an example. Inclusion for me is something as basic as you're in a meeting or with a group of people, and how do you even ensure that even the quietest people or the introverted people, so to say, feel comfortable enough to participate in the conversation. And it's not just the flamboyant or the usually assertive ones, who are participating. So I think, yeah, you're absolutely right. It's important to create the psychologically safe environment, for everyone. Meenakshi, I also wanted to quickly touch upon your earlier question, and I'm reminded of an example. We do these skip meetings, right? I think these are very, very important, to listen to people. And very often what happens is, I think these are standard in most organizations. In one of my previous organizations, we were doing the skip meeting, and people were silent, and I was still new, I was a new HR leader, and I was trying to convey with as much sincerity as possible that, hey, we are here to talk to you, to listen to you. This is a listening forum, and we really want to understand. But they just came up with the standard basic questions, but otherwise most of them were silent. But the good thing is, which I felt very happy later is, after that meeting, at least 2-3 people walked up to me individually and they said that we want to talk to you. We do have a concern. We want to talk to you. We were not comfortable raising it in front of everyone, but we do want to talk to you, one on one. So to be, to have been able to convey, that trust to them, and them being able to feel comfortable, walking up to me, I think those are, indicators. And that's where I think it goes back to, in your individual capacity, what are you doing and how are you conveying to the people that you're working with, that you are able to create that safe space for them. And I think that is so important.
So I just love what you said, Rekha, and it reminds me of one of the known ways in which you build behaviors, which is Alina has also alluded to it. What behaviors are you rewarding? Say, for example, if there is somebody who is quiet, and if that is okay, is what you're conveying, then there is no reason for them to speak up. But if there is somebody who's voicing, their opinion or thoughts, and what you do after that really determines whether they feel safe enough to speak again. So it's in the response that we offer to what the other person does. I think that is a sort of something that enables psychological safety. So thanks, Alina, for triggering that thought. You've put it on chat. So what happens after people have spoken up? Is my response to that enabling or derailing? I think that is a point to think about, and I'd like to hear how this sits with both of you.
So two things I wanted to touch upon, and again, the question that you raised, it's like got so many nuances to it, but I'll just pick on two which immediately come to my mind. One, I think as leaders, one of the biggest challenges that we deal with is retaliation. Especially if someone has raised a concern or an issue, and if it's usually something about the organization or something about a manager or something about another leader, how do you deal with it in a sensitive manner so that you are not, creating a scenario where there is retaliation against, that employee. And, that I think is so important, because one, you are automatically then making it very, very, unsafe for that individual. And in fact, this can actually trigger that person actually even maybe thinking of leaving the organization. I think, and that's really, and that would be very, very unfortunate. So again, how do you deal with it? And each case is very different. So, I'm not even getting into that. Every single situation is so different, and, how do you deal with it? And two is, the other one that I wanted to touch upon is going back to the earlier example that I gave. Someone's come to you with a question or a concern or a situation. The first most important is listening. I mean, there's no doubt at all about it. But two is, what do you do with it? And if you do not act on it, then you have already conveyed to the person that, oh, whatever you told me or whatever you asked me or whatever you highlighted to me, I either don't have the time for it, or I do not have the inclination to deal with it. And that is already conveyed to the person that, okay,
That's no
this
point.
this leader or this person is, not willing to spend that time or invest in me or listen to me. And I think that is very, very dangerous. So you're absolutely right. The trust and the listening part comes, but then what's also more important is how have you responded, or what have you done with anything that's been brought to you.
Yeah, because I mean, they're going to give you the benefit of the doubt at the beginning. And if you're distracted when you're talking to them, to Neeraj's point, the listening, people get a sense based on watching you and what you're doing of, are you actively listening, or are you juggling? Are you looking at your email while you're talking to them? Are you on a Zoom call, but you're looking over here, kind of thing. And they get a sense, and that's going to impact how they react to that. Or even more broadly, like survey results, it's important as leaders to demonstrate how you respond to survey results in a way that is positive and reinforces that we want to hear this feedback. And you can respond in one way, or you can respond in another way, and that's gonna influence what happens in the next survey or the next set of interactions, because people are basically going to feel like, well, there's no point in doing this, so I'm going to get quiet. I'm not going to respond to the survey, or I'm not going to respond honestly to the survey. And then it's like, why are we even going through this exercise if that's where we get to?
I want to add a couple of things here. So the last point that you made, Ben, about the surveys, I've known, and I think you alluded to that earlier as well, in one of your earlier responses. I've seen and I've been in rooms where these survey results are being reviewed within an organization, and the focus is more on trying to guess who said what instead of focusing on what is being said, right? And then and because I've been on the other side, now if I'm responding to such surveys, I'm always thinking about how can I anonymize the use of my language? Because if people have spent enough time with me, they know how I write. So that's a thought. And that to me means that I'm not in a psychologically safe space if I have to think about it, because then being the system or the tool being anonymous doesn't mean anything if people can still guess that I was the one who wrote it. So in the US, it's particularly hard for me. This is a bit of a joke, right? Because my spellings are still British, so I have to I have to fix that. The other thing that came up for me is about trust, and both of you have talked about this. And I think that we all talk about building trust, but I think earning trust is the first step before you can build it. And that goes back to, I think, I can't remember now which of you said that, but you talked about what happens after something is shared, right? So listening is the first step, but then what do you do after you've listened to something? And to me, that is the behavior or the action that you take that will indicate to the other person whether you are trustworthy or not. And that's the action as a leader that you can take to earn the trust before you can go ahead and build it. I just wanted to share those two things.
So I'm just going to sort of shift gear in the conversation. And we've spoken about what it is, what it means, how it shows up. But as leaders, if I want to say tomorrow, I'm like Rekha was just saying, she's just started on a new role. If I want to make this happen, what are some of the behaviors that will actually enable? And Neeraj has talked about active listening as a key starting point. If we could sort of talk through what are some of the ground, yeah, the behaviors that will enable safety for people to either learn, to challenge, to share, whatever level of safety it is. What are some of those things that come up for you, Ben?
So I think that, I mean, and we've talked through a couple of the things. I mean, Rekha mentioned some of it. It's sort of creating an environment in which that kind of dialogue can happen in a positive way. And that, I mean, to the point about diversity, that can be different for different people. So, I mean, I tend to go to, you want to have, whether they're one-on-ones or small group sessions, because people usually are less likely to be honest and provide feedback in a larger group. So, basically, providing or creating environments where you have one-on-ones with your folks, or small group sessions with your folks. I think the other point that she made that I definitely agree with is having a session that doesn't necessarily have an agenda. You want to just hear about what's going on with them, what's top of mind, like what are they thinking about, so that it's not a status report. It's not me talking about something that's going on my particular piece of work. It's, what's causing you stress, what are you dealing with today, and sort of opening up that dialogue. I even go to the point and is, you know learn about them or give them an opportunity to talk about what's going on outside of the work environment. Get to know them as a person rather than sort of just someone that is a resource in your work environment. And that creates a connection on a different level. And then the other thing that I think about is, as a leader, demonstrating, some level of vulnerability yourself. So it doesn't show that you're a Superman or a Superwoman all the time. It's, I'm dealing with an issue myself right now, and here's what I've got going on in my life. And you're encouraging people to open up and talk to you about things in a different way. If you come across like everything's always good, I'm on top of all of this stuff, you're not encouraging people to come to you with problems, because they, if what you get is the sense of, I only want to hear good news, then the issues that are under, creating problems in your organization are never going to get floated up.
Yeah, this reminds me of my school days, Ben, where I had a math teacher, and math is still not my, if I can help it, I can run away from numbers at any time. And when I go back, there was this math teacher who would write the problem on the blackboard, and before you know it, 2 or 3 of them would have answered. Yeah. And so the entire focus was on those people who got it all right. And so it would make me feel so small. I don't want to ask a question.
Can't hear. What's that? What is that?
I was worried that to ask a question in case, I might look stupid, because here are my classmates who've got it right. So, it just reminded me that sometimes you really need to look at those people, not just the high performers in that sense, right? Not just the people who are speaking a lot in a meeting, for example. And like Rekha said, look at those who are not speaking. What is it that they have to say? And it really shows for, I'm interested in you.
Yeah, you want to know what their opinion is and validate them. And, being a parent of a teenage girl who now is beyond that, who graduated from college and is successfully launched, that's a whole separate topic. But a lot in high school was, and she would see all the stuff in the media and everything, but, it wasn't about providing a solution. It was validating that, whatever I feel is legitimate. And I may not be able to agree with that, but I'm showing you respect by listening to what you're saying, validating, and then thinking about what we can try to do to address that. It may not be the answer that you want, but there's an element of, if I just come in and say, no, it has to be this, then you're not even letting them, go, and you're gonna start to not get that feedback. They'll go elsewhere.
Sure. Yeah.
I just wanted to add to that, and I think Neeraj is kind of read my mind, and that's exactly what he's put in the chat also. Very often, what I've seen with certain leaders is, they go into a meeting or a conversation already having decided that, okay, this is how things have to be done. And you're actually not even willing to listen to your team, or not giving them an opportunity to even talk, or share their thoughts. Or even when they share their thoughts, you've already decided. And, the response then comes that, oh, no, but I think we should do it this way. Or, I think this is how it should happen. And that's a classic recipe for, disaster, because you do it a few times, and after that, the team is, just going to say that, okay, why don't you just tell us what to do? And we will just go ahead and do it. And I've seen this so many times in my career, and it's so unfortunate. I think there's a saying, which I saw recently somewhere. It says that when your most active employee goes quiet, then there's something seriously wrong. And you really need to, figure out what is going wrong. So I think, and going back to what Ben mentioned earlier, a leader does not have to be someone who always knows it all. A leader who's vulnerable, a leader who's willing to listen, a leader who's willing to change his opinion. So I may have walked into a meeting with a certain opinion, but if my team member has a better view, has a better idea, has a better thought process, I should have the humility to accept it and say it. And every time I say that, the team and those individuals are getting the trust that, hey, I can share my idea, and this person is willing to change their view. And doesn't have to be that you have to change your view all the time, but even if you do it 3 or 4 times out of 10 times, you've already created the safe space, for the team, and they know that, okay, this is a leader here who's willing to listen, and I can comfortably share my views and thoughts and ideas. And the more you do it, the more, they become comfortable. But a few times you cut them off, and then that's it. It just stops them.
Yeah. So I'd like to just take a, invite the audience to share on the chat perhaps. What do you see as behaviors that can enable psychological safety at your workplace? Perhaps behaviors you've seen before or you'd like to enable going forward. Any thoughts from the audience? No judgment. Okay. Authentic, being authentic. It alludes a little bit to what Bennett said as well. Vulnerable, authentic. Yeah, so keep it coming. If you have more ideas, we can find ways to enable this for everybody. Transparency, decision making. Nice point.
Yeah, I think that's a great point, Neeraj. I mean, I found that if you can explain the why, and I think that was put in one of the other earlier comments, sometimes you can help get people on board. But if you don't show enough respect to explain the why, then folks are sort of like, okay, well, this is what we're doing. I guess I don't have any input into this. But again, that's another way of showing vulnerability, of saying sort of, we thought through it in this way. This is what we thought. And then to Rekha's point, what do you think? Is this right or not? So not coming to the table with something fully baked. I think that's a key consideration.
Absolutely. And there's more coming here. So Avinash says the leader speaks and listens to the most junior person. That's an enabler. Yeah. Because you sort of make it a level playing field by demonstrating so, right? Natalia. Yeah.
Sorry, I like what Elena's mentioned also. I think going back and giving feedback on any ideas or suggestions, I think is so, so important, because you really need to close the loop. Otherwise, it's all very nice to do brainstorming sessions and, ask for ideas and all of that. And then you do not do anything after it. In fact, I see this very often in employee engagement surveys. Usually most surveys have an action. I have a question that, was your last year's feedback acted upon? And many organizations lose out on it because they make the mistake on never going back to their people and telling them that, hey, this is what came up in the survey and these are the actions that we're taking. And because of that, people start losing confidence year on year when the surveys happen. So I think going back and giving feedback on the ideas, suggestions, concerns is really important.
Absolutely. And it ties back to what you said earlier as well, right? You listen, great. What do you do after? And is there safety in that? Is there retaliation, or is confidentiality preserved? Because a lot of times that also happens, right? I may have said something in confidence, and the next thing, I'm hearing it from someone else. So preserving that is also equally important. Neeraj was talking about admitting mistakes. We talked about that just now. I wanted to add something here. So one of you was talking about, you go into a meeting with a certain thought, and then you actually change your mind about it based on what you've heard from your team, right? And I think one that demonstrates courage as a leader, and that's a great behavior to model for your team, because at the end of the day, we all, to me, that's also tied to learning agility, right? So if there is enough evidence or enough pointers to say, okay, yeah, I have new information now, And so that's how I'm showing that as a leader, I'm learning. Otherwise, I'm just stuck to what I know. And that's another powerful demonstration of being a leader, because then to what you had said earlier, all of you had shared, that being vulnerable and showing that you don't have all the answers, which another sidebar, in today's complex world, it is impossible for any of us to know everything about every situation. And that's why we function in teams. Otherwise, we would all be individual contributors, right? So that's the other piece. So the agility piece, and that's something that I focus on a lot. I focus on personal agility a lot. And I think learning agility and the ability to um, form your opinions in a very intelligent way and to demonstrating that to your team, I think is very powerful as well. I noticed something here. For some reason, it came to me as a direct message. Natalia had said an enabler is team members' ideas being implemented. And I think that what Elena shared about the feedback loop, it's really taking that the next step, right? Yeah. Okay. Avinash, you said you have a question?
Yeah, is it okay if I ask it rather
Yeah.
than typing it?
Yeah.
See, I have made an observation by two of my experiences. One is very, very early in my career when I used to work for an NGO called CRY, Child Relief and You. Now it's called Child Rights and You. And the other is an NGO that I am very closely associated with. What I've found in all these, and then anecdotes that I've heard, is in this NGO sector, I have seen people speak very fearlessly and very boldly in large format uh, uh, internal meetings or conferences or something. And I've seen this myself, both in both the organizations that I have worked and exposed to. So with this observation, I had maybe two questions. One is, has anyone in the group kind of, had a similar observation or experience something like that? And the other question is, what could be the possible reason? uh, I'm trying to understand why it could be maybe prevalent in that kind of a culture if that really is the case.
Avinash, do you want to address it to Ben or Rekha? Is that
Maybe Ben, maybe Ben, because only and one of the reasons why Ben, I thought I would ask you is you, Meenakshi mentioned that you work very closely with the government in the United States, and I'm assuming that working with the government is fairly similar and comparable across the world, and therefore I thought maybe you might have some insight on.
So just to clarify, you're saying you've seen instances where folks in that environment express their opinions and their feedback very boldly and loudly in terms of what they're doing, and it was in certain cultures like that versus others?
Yes, in the non-government organization sector, yes.
Yeah, I mean, I think that two things could be happening there. I mean, one is that, or maybe three, but sometimes around government missions, there is an incredible amount of personal passion. And it's not prevalent everywhere. So, as an example, I've done work with USAID, and the culture in USAID is very collaborative. It's very we've got to get everyone on board with what the path is going forward, and it encourages folks to really offer up their opinions. Whereas obviously, if you look at, I mean, I haven't done as much work on the defense and intel side, but DoD is a very command and control environment. So the culture basically doesn't encourage folks to necessarily be speaking up. It's, I take orders from the people above me. So some of it is not consistent across organizations. You're going to have different organizational cultures, just like you do in commercial organizations. And so I think that it really depends. It also depends on the leadership in that organization. How open are they, just like we've been talking about, to encouraging that kind of thing. I think the last part that I would say, and this can get dangerous, but I think at times, if people get to a point where they are really frustrated with what they are not seeing, they may voice their opinions really loudly, but that's usually happens sort of as the precursor to some other action happening, whether it's them leaving or something blowing up, like that they're sort of like fed up. And so they will sort of be louder about their feedback, in the hopes that by raising their voice a little bit louder, that it would change the dynamic. And that, in my experience, that doesn't usually work. But it's something that people feel really strongly about. And so they're saying like, hey, this is my last gasp chance to try to change things. So I'm going to put it out there before I walk out the door, kind of thing, or to see if I'm louder, does that encourage any kind of change?
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you for that, Ben. Rekha, do you have anything that you'd like to add?
No specific experience of working with NGOs, but I would echo what is there in the chat. I think in larger organizations, there are too many constraints which come into play. You have organization politics, you have hierarchies, the things that are implicit. Oh, you can't say this to so and so, you can't say this here, so and so may think like that, so and so may then go against you. Sometimes I've had my team members say this, Rekha, they come to me with a problem maybe about another leader, and when I say that, listen, I'm willing to talk to the leader, they're like, no, please don't do that, we will try to manage it. Because if they know, they will immediately know that we've come and told you, and then they will retaliate against us. And I feel so sorry, when I hear such things. But unfortunately, that's what the reality is. And then you just have to try and work your way through those kind of issues. And I think, in smaller organizations, I don't know, I've never worked in a startup, but again, even in startups, I think there is a lot more room to debate and contribute and ideate and be able to share your, because I think that's so essential, right, for the growth of a startup. And I think similar case in NGO, although I've really not worked in these, so I can't comment from any real-time experience.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for sharing. And one of the things I also wanted to call out was something Neeraj had shared here. He said maybe because it's not related to, maybe no penalty for speaking up, or no impact on career growth and or compensation. And I also want to yeah, go ahead, Ben.
Sorry, I was gonna say, and while Rekha was talking, it made me think of this. Like there's a concept in innovation around failing fast, and then rewarding it. So, when you think about all of that, and it's like, but the organization's still trying to produce results, whether that's impact for their client or financial results. What if I get to the end of the year and I failed on 4 initiatives, but I failed fast on those 4 initiatives? Like, how is that going to be recognized? What is my performance review going to look like? I didn't waste more of the company's resources by continuing to go down that line, but how the company responds to that, or how the leadership responds to that, is going to be very indicative of, am I actually encouraging that kind of innovation, or do I just want to see positive results? I don't care how you do it. And so again, it goes to the whole idea of like, am I creating that safe space for people to do things in the right way? I mean, they never, very rarely, when you read about it in the literature, it's there, but company X had this success. Well, but how many things didn't work before they got to that success? Or how many fail? I mean, usually when you read about innovation, it's a very small percentage of things that get positive results. But how does that happen, and how are those things managed? And am I encouraging that kind of thing to try to get to the right answer, or are we just hell bent on, I'm the leader and I say we're going this way, and I don't really want your opinion about something different, and you're going to get obviously a very different result that way.
Absolutely.
That's a very interesting point. And I just remember that, one of my previous organizations, and I've not really seen this in the other organizations that I've worked in. It wasn't just accomplishing the KRAs, or your performance goals. It was also how you went about accomplishing it. So did you demonstrate the right leadership behaviors while accomplishing them, or did you just trample all over, your other stakeholders or peers, in your pursuit of, accomplishing the KRAs? And I think that's just so important. And if as an organization, you can actually make this as part of your culture, as your processes, that you're promoting, the right behavior, the right collaboration. I think it makes a huge difference. But if
Yeah,
it's just kiare, then I think a lot of these then get compromised, unfortunately.
yeah, there's a lot of, I've seen a lot of things when you look at that around, um, you know, wanting, either measuring leaders by attrition rates, which can be a thing, and then also, I mean, yes, brilliant jerks. The other thing that I know in a past organization, we had a concept of followership. And as a leader, are people wanting to work with you? Are people following you where you're going? And that can be a positive indication of you're doing something right as a leader. And obviously the flip side is if you're a leader and you have a really high attrition rate, what's driving that? So it's hard to draw, but you've got to look at some of those metrics at times to sort of figure out what's good and what's bad. But the brilliant jerks, it's like, okay, yeah, there's this person that's horrible to the people and they bring in the revenue and they continue to get rewarded. So what does that say about the culture of the organization and how they go forward?
Absolutely. And, this also ties back to I just wanted to say this one thing, Rekha, when you talked about startups, um, I have worked in them, and what I have found is that there's always this potential for lack of psychological safety very quickly, is because when you start out, you have a small team, everybody does everything, and all hands on deck type thing. But then you also very quickly end up having power centers in terms of knowledge base. And then when the startups grow, then instead of following processes, you tend to follow people, and then you tend to do what that person is doing as opposed to setting up standardized processes. And you end up having a bunch of brilliant jerks as your executive leadership. And then it's very difficult for those kinds of companies to scale. And that's the environments that I've seen several times. And so on one hand, smaller teams and startup environments um, can have extremely high psychological safety, but then that risk always exists. And I think that unless we have emotionally intelligent, emotionally mature leaders, it can very quickly go the other way. I just wanted to add that there. And Elena had mentioned earlier here in the chat saying, if there's no incentive to solve problems and share ideas, it goes back to the failing fast and looking at how you're achieving your goals piece as well. I just want to do a quick time check. We have another 5 or 6 more minutes. And as we wrap up this conversation, I invite both Rekha and Ben to talk to us about, I'm going to combine a couple of questions that we had sent you. Your top 1 or 2 tips for us as individuals. Doesn't matter what our position or title is, for us as individuals to enable psychological safety, and then the added dimension of virtual and hybrid teams.
Can I touch on the virtual one first? Because I feel it's really, really important. And I remember one of the questions was, how do you also ensure, the right space for individual contributors and, people working virtually. So I think it's really important to leverage as many different forums as possible. I mean, there's no doubt at all that the trust and the listening and all of that are at the very core. That's the foundation. But today, when you know that there is no face-to-face possible and that person is sitting, anywhere, so you must, look at various different, means which are available today, which were maybe not available a year or so back. So technology, AI powered chatbots. In fact, we are actually using them. And believe me, we're still in the trial phase, but I have already seen a huge amount of, benefit. When you can't, to some extent, it can replicate a listening, what shall I say, a comfortable listening space. to the employee who's working virtually or working remotely. And then that's just a trigger. Obviously, the next question is, what do you do with it? Because again, if you don't do anything with it, if you don't follow up on it, then it is meaningless. So I think it's important, and I've just given one example. There are many that we can talk about. There are many options available, but being open to and being able to leverage technology and looking at different options for different work groups, I think is so important when you're dealing with a virtual or a hybrid work phase. And I think your first question, I would just go back to, I know we've discussed a lot of it already, but just, as a leader, as an individual, being there completely, and listening is so huge. I think it was during my journey as a coach that I even realized what listening actually meant. Unfortunately, I don't think in our entire, education system or our upbringing, we ever really give any importance to listening. And it's so unfortunate, because it's so crucial to a human interaction. And I think it's only in that journey. And even now, I don't think I'm a great listener. I think it's still a journey for me, but it's the most important factor. And just being there for that individual and being there, just your presence and them getting that confidence that you're there for them no matter what. And I think that's the most important attribute.
Yeah, I would just add, I mean, again, I think we've covered a lot of it, but you mentioned it earlier, Meenu, leading from where you are and then meeting the people where they are. So if what works for them is a one-on-one, whether it's in person or virtual, like sometimes you can have a phone conversation and it's a one-on-one and you can get to something that you wouldn't have got to in another forum. But listening and investing the time, I mean, as a leader, of course, your biggest constraints is your time. And so being willing to say, look, if you want to talk at, 7 p.m. or 8 p.m., because that's the only time that we can make it work, that's fine. Or early in the morning, like be flexible around that as a leader to essentially indicate to them that you're willing, you want to engage at that level. And that can be a virtual thing, that can be a phone conversation, or that can be in person. I mean, I always sort of say never underestimate the value of pizza for a team, but it's like you can, there's little things that you can do around. I mean, Rekha mentioned lunch initially, like, in forums where you're not trying to solve a business problem, like you're having a meal or you're just having a conversation or you don't have an agenda. Most of the good stuff comes out during those kinds of forums. And so I think that's what's important to underscore, whether that's in person or virtual. I mean, and to the point around diversity and inclusion, everyone has different, I mean, I know this can go off into a whole different topic, but everyone has different thoughts around this. There are some people in our organization that want to be in the office. It's a fairly small percentage, but some people want to be in the office and some people really want to be remote. And, so there are people where going and taking the time to go have coffee with them in person is going to make a huge difference. And then there are other people that are perfectly comfortable picking up the phone and talking on the phone with no visual or no face-to-face interaction, and that's okay for them too. So as a leader, you've got to think about, and I guess as an employee too, you've always got to think about what's the connection point between you and that other individual or that other group of people, and what works for them and doesn't work for them, and what works for you and doesn't work for you. And so you're going to be the best leader that you can be if you can do that in a way that provides the greatest kind of connection.
Mm. Thank you both so much for that. And I saw that there are some cards that have been added to the idea boards. We will download this and send it back to everyone. And I've added a couple of online resources there under the What Else bucket, including Amy Edmondson's TED Talk on psychological safety. Some of you may be aware that this is her life's work, Amy Edmondson, and she's written a book called Fearless Organizations. And this TED Talk is really fantastic, so I've added that to there. I am walking away just with even more validation of putting people first, and then really going back to those core human skills of listening and being present, and those being the foundational aspects of how to do psychological safety at work. That's what I'm walking away with. Over to you, Priya.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Rekha and Ben, for bringing your thoughts real time at work, what happens, what doesn't happen, and your experiences. It's been really very enriching. And what I'm walking away with is the fact that you've got to meet people where they are, not where you are and where you want them to come to, right? You've got to start from there. So, which means you've got to take a couple of steps forward. And I think that is really key to creating this for organizations, for your team. And to me, the one thing that I would also want to add is that it's not a one-time activity, so to say. It's something that we've got to invest and reinvest and keep investing, because people change. Where they are at different points is different. Your teams change. So many dynamics when it comes to people. And I think if we can walk away with saying, yeah, I'll sort of commit to investing in making this, so that it's sustainable. Yeah, it's something that can keep going on. So with that, we'd like to hear from the group. What is the one thing that you're all taking away?
I got one. So whenever it was being mentioned about startups and brilliant jerks, that really was something I had not considered, and the impact on scalability. That right there was a big learning thing for me. And now it's going to sort of change the way that I approach different situations when I work with startups or smaller businesses.
Thank you
Thank
for
you.
sharing that, Alina. Yeah.
For me, if you can hear basically what came out, I don't know who mentioned this, but it's easy to attribute disengagement and attrition to external ecosystem. But introspection clearly is courageous, and you really need to be vulnerable to be able to truly listen to people and then act on it. I think that also came out of this conversation, because if you don't follow up, then you haven't really done justice. Thank you so much. It's been wonderful listening into this brilliant conversation.
Thank you, Neeraj.
Thank you.
Avinash? You're on mute. That's why I called you out.
I shared my views on the idea board, so I'll probably just kind of summarize it. I like the fact that we were able to spend some time on really understanding the importance of creating a sense of psychological trust through verbal as well as, more importantly, non-verbal cues and styles of communication. That's something I really like. And the answers that I received both from Ben and Rekha, they were very directional on my query that I had in my mind. The observation in the query that it probably is the passion of the people that majorly contributes, perhaps, and also the size of the organization. And I think that was a brilliant take you gave, Meenakshi, that it can, the word of caution you brought out on the startup because the size, that was brilliant. Thanks so much for that.
Absolutely.
And as always, whenever you interact with Priya, she always leaves you with one nugget, right? So this time the nugget was, so nicely articulated that you have to meet the person where the person wants to meet and not where you want to meet them. I mean, it has got so many layers to it, right? And it can be used in so many conversations. So thank you, Priya, for that nugget.
Yeah, I think Ben sort of triggered that as well. Yeah. Anything from you, Natalia? Are you there?
I know she had said she's not feeling well. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm here. Hi. So I think yes, I appreciate that you just discussed, and I think that it's what important that what are my takeaway that it doesn't matter which position you have, but it does matter that you create around yourself this culture, and you start listening others, you respect others, and also in your maybe even small team, you create this culture where people have no fear to speak up, and where they can see the actions after that not just their opinion, everybody like listened, but also they see the difference when they contributed their opinion. What are the next steps after that?
Love that, the whole feedback loop and closing it. Yep, absolutely. Thank you, Natalia. So with that, I can't believe we are actually at the end of season 1, Psychological Safety at Work. And thank you, all of you, and special gratitude to Rekha and Ben for sharing your time with us. When Priya and I started this was all about defining corporate speak buzzwords and making it accessible in the form of specific actions and behaviors rather than just vague concepts out there. That was the objective that we started off this with. We hope we've met at least a portion of it, and in the pre-conversation to this, both Rekha and Ben shared some really great topics. We have at least the next 4 seasons covered. So stay tuned for more of these conversations that matter. And my deep gratitude to all of you for your participation and making this such a co-creative process. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. It was absolute pleasure.
Bye.
Thank you, everyone. Take care.
And everyone, bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.